The soul knows before the mind understands. You will sense the coming of a new era in your life, not through logic, but through symbolic events, synchronicities, and the strange stirrings of the unconscious. The best stage of your life does not approach with fanfare. It whispers, hums beneath the noise, and begins as a discontent you can no longer suppress. You may first feel it as restlessness, not the kind born of ambition or boredom, but the kind that unsettles your very identity. You will begin to ask yourself, who am I, really? What have I been doing? The answers that once satisfied now feel hollow. And though this discomfort frightens you, it is your soul awakening. The life you were living starts to peel away. Masks you once wore now feel suffocating. Roles you once performed no longer fit. You begin to see that much of what you called your personality was simply a defense. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This privilege begins when you stop performing and start observing. There is a dissolution of certainty. You may feel as though you're losing control, but this is precisely the point. The ego, which once ruled, is now being humbled. You are being invited into the depths. This descent is not regression, but the very doorway to your becoming. You notice an attraction to solitude, not loneliness, but sacred solitude. You are not isolating yourself. You are preparing to meet yourself. The outer world no longer distracts you as it once did. Silence becomes your teacher. You begin to listen not just to your thoughts, but to the deep pulse of your being. Dreams become vivid. Symbols appear. Animals, archetypes, forgotten places. Your unconscious begins to speak in images, in emotions, in metaphors. The rational mind doesn't always understand, but something inside you does. Jung taught that the unconscious communicates through symbols. And now, the symbols are everywhere. You experience lost relationships, goals, habits falling away. You mourn them, but you also sense their expiration. They were part of an old self that no longer serves your truth. You are not being punished. You are being unburdened. At first, you may resist. You will try to go back to what is known, but the doorway has already opened, and you cannot unsee what has been revealed. Jung warned, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And yet, this pain is birth, not death. You begin to hear a new voice inside. It is quieter than the voice of fear, but far more faithful. It does not push, it guides. It does not explain, it calls. You do not know where it will lead, but for the first time, you are willing to follow. You become sensitive to what is false. You cannot tolerate small talk, fake smiles, or shallow pursuits. You crave depth. You long for the sacred. You want to build a life with meaning, not a life that looks good, a life that feels right. You grow tired of pleasing others, not out of defiance, but because you have realized it costs you too much. You begin to choose yourself not selfishly, but soulfully. You stop betraying your inner knowing just to be liked. You start to see patterns that have repeated for years, patterns in love, in work, in pain. And suddenly, you feel the power to break them. This is not willpower, this is insight. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Now you see fate for what it is, a mirror. You feel called to create, to write, to build, to sing, to speak, to serve. It is not about fame or success. It is about expressing the essence that has been suppressed. You realize creativity is not a talent. It is the soul's language. You stop asking for permission. You no longer wait to be chosen. You realize you are already worthy. The stage of your best life begins when you no longer seek validation, but follow vocation. You may experience fear, but it no longer controls you. Fear becomes feedback, not a prison. You understand it as a protector of the old, not a guide to the new. You begin to move forward even with trembling hands. You are drawn to heal, not just your surface wounds, but your ancestral pain, your childhood imprints, your archetypal struggles. You stop blaming and start integrating. The wound becomes the womb of transformation. You sense time differently. You stop rushing. You live more slowly, but more deeply. Each moment begins to feel sacred, as if life is speaking through everything. You stop waiting for the big event and start noticing the miracle in the mundane. You feel gratitude in unexpected places. Gratitude for your pain, your failures, your solitude, because you see how each one shaped you, stripped you, softened you, and brought you here. Your suffering is not your identity, it is your initiation. You begin to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You release the chains of resentment that have bound you to your past. You learn that forgiveness is freedom, not forgetfulness. You love differently. You stop clinging. You stop chasing. You love from fullness, not emptiness. You stop trying to be loved and start being loved. Your relationships become sacred mirrors, not survival contracts. You become unrecognizable to some. They say you've changed, and they are right. You are not who you were. You are not even who you thought you would be. You are becoming who you are meant to be. You find beauty in what is broken. You are no longer obsessed with perfection. You see the soul in the scar. You honor the cracked places as the light's entry. You stop hiding your wounds and begin to speak from them. Your energy shifts. You no longer resonate with chaos. You protect your peace. You honor your boundaries. You stop chasing those who drain you. You start choosing those who nourish you. You start to trust life again, not because it is easy, but because you see its intelligence, even in the detours, even in the delays, even in the dark. You feel guided even when the path is unclear. You feel moments of awe, watching the sky, hearing a song, holding a hand. You realize that joy is not in the grand, but in the genuine. The best stage of life is not about what you have, but how deeply you experience what is. You begin to embrace death not morbidly, but reverently. You understand that to live fully, you must let things die, old identities, outgrown dreams, expectations. You stop fearing endings and start honoring transitions. You stop comparing. Your life is not late. Your path is not wrong. Your timing is not broken. You realize the soul unfolds at its own pace. You stop racing. You start arriving. You feel free not because you have everything, but because you need less. You are no longer enslaved by the world's noise. You are tuned to your own music. You are dancing to a rhythm only you can hear. You are no longer afraid to be seen. Not just your light, but your flaws, your fears, your failures. You are not perfect, but you are whole. You are real. And that is more than enough. You begin to serve, not out of guilt, but from overflow. You want to contribute. You want to uplift. You realize your gift was never meant just for you, it was always meant to be shared. You see the divine in everything, in the broken, the ugly, the silent. You understand that God, or the self as Jung called it, lives not in the sky, but in the soil of your being. You stop searching for heaven and begin to build it here. You feel peace, even in uncertainty, even in chaos, because you are no longer controlled by outcome. You trust your process. You honor your path. You walk not ahead, not behind, but in alignment. You have begun the best stage of your life. Not because life has become easier, but because you have become deeper, stronger, softer, truer. You are not the same, and you were never meant to be. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. Silence is no longer awkward, it is sacred. You realize that true connection doesn't always require explanation, only presence. The best version of yourself doesn't perform, it simply is. You stop needing answers. You stop demanding certainty. Instead, you begin to trust the unfolding. Jung said, "Faith, hope, love, and insight are the highest achievements of human effort." You realize that insight doesn't mean knowing everything, it means being present with what is, and allowing life to reveal itself. You become curious about your pain rather than ashamed of it. You ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" That question opens the door to wisdom. That shift turns wounds into teachers. You are no longer controlled by shame. You see that what once made you feel less than was actually your uniqueness misunderstood. You stop apologizing for your existence. You begin to embody dignity, not pride, but the deep awareness that your life matters. Your inner child begins to feel safe again, not because nothing ever hurts, but because your adult self has learned to stay. You no longer abandon yourself when things get hard. You show up, you stay. You soothe, that is self, love in its most mature form. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You learn to choose what is calm, consistent, and kind over what is dramatic, chaotic, and familiar. You see that peace is not boring, it's revolutionary. You notice you're drawn to different environments. Where you once craved stimulation, you now seek grounding. Nature speaks louder. The wind carries messages. The trees mirror patience. You begin to live with the rhythm of the earth. You find joy in simplicity, a hot drink, a good book, a quiet walk, the laughter of someone you love. You see that your best life is not an extravagant one, but an honest one. You begin to live symbolically. Every event has meaning. Every meeting feels ordained. You don't force these interpretations, they come to you. The universe feels alive again, not just mechanical. You are in communion with it. You notice your body speaks, and you actually listen. You don't push past exhaustion. You don't ignore your hunger. You stop abusing your physical form and begin to honor it. Jung believed the body holds wisdom the mind cannot grasp, and you are beginning to understand what that means. You begin to desire depth in all things, not just in relationships or conversations, but in your own soul. You want to know what you stand for, what you believe, who you are beyond the inherited beliefs and borrowed dreams. You begin to deconstruct, not to destroy, but to discover. You stop chasing time. You let go of the panic that tells you you're running out. You begin to live fully in the day you're given. Your best life is not a destination in the future. It is a presence in the now. You start to speak the truth, even when it shakes your voice. You stop muting your intuition. You begin to let people experience the real you, even if they leave. You realize that losing others is painful, but losing yourself is far worse. You value integration over inspiration. You don't just want to learn, you want to embody. You stop consuming more and more information and start practicing what you already know. Transformation is no longer an idea, it is a daily act. You stop proving and start being. The need to be impressive fades. You become less concerned with being liked and more concerned with being aligned. You finally realize that peace is more valuable than applause. You make peace with your parents, or at least the pain they passed down. You see their humanity. You stop needing them to have been perfect. And by doing so, you free yourself from repeating what was never yours to carry. You begin to walk away without guilt. You stop trying to convince people of your worth. You learn that love isn't about sacrificing your soul, it's about protecting it. What you leave behind is not rejection, it's self-respect. You become okay with not being understood. Not everyone will get your evolution. Not everyone is meant to walk with you. Some chapters require solitude, and that is not a punishment, it is preparation. You begin to embrace paradox. You realize that healing and hurting can coexist. That strength includes softness. That confidence requires humility. The soul lives in opposites, and your ability to hold them both is a sign of maturity. You stop needing life to be fair and start making life meaningful. You see that waiting for justice delays your joy. Instead, you focus on what you can create, what you can heal, what you can embody. That shift is liberation. You start making decisions from your soul, not your fear. You don't just do what is safe, you do what is sacred. You stop negotiating with your intuition. You begin to follow it, even when the path ahead is foggy. You allow yourself to rest deeply, without guilt. You understand that rest is not laziness, it is alignment. Your body is not a machine. Your mind is not a tool. Your being is a temple, and now you worship at its altar. You begin to dismantle the illusion of control. You stop micromanaging life. You let go of the reins and learn to dance with the unknown. Jung said, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally unsolvable. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." And now you are outgrowing what you once tried so hard to fix. You grieve fully, finally. You stop bypassing your sadness. You cry for what was lost, for the versions of yourself that never got to live. And as you do, you make space, not for despair but for truth. Grief becomes your gatekeeper to joy. You begin to feel like yourself again, and somehow, also like someone you've never met before, because you are not going back. You are going forward into a version of yourself that was always waiting to be remembered. You stop holding your breath. You inhale the moment. You exhale control. You realize that you don't need to be ready. You only need to be willing. You feel it in your bones, not a thought, not an idea, a knowing that something has shifted, that the old has fallen away, that the new has not fully arrived, but is already forming. That you have crossed a threshold, and in that quiet moment, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply real, you understand. This is it. You are no longer waiting for your best life. You are no longer chasing it. You are no longer dreaming about it. You are living it. You begin to honor your own seasons. You no longer rush your growth or compare your pace to others. You understand that the soul blooms in its own time. You are spring, summer, autumn, and winter all in one lifetime, and every stage is sacred. You feel less urgency to be understood and more desire to understand. You listen not just to words, but to silence. You read between the lines. You sense what is not said. The world becomes less hostile and more mysterious. You let go of needing to fix others. You realize that people only change when they are ready. You stop forcing wisdom on those who are not asking. Your energy is too precious to be spent where it is not received. You begin to laugh again, not the laughter that hides pain, but the kind that springs from freedom. You remember the joy of being alive. You laugh at yourself, at life, at the absurdity of it all, and that is healing. You stop idolizing struggle. You realize that suffering is not a badge of honor. You no longer equate exhaustion with virtue. You begin to choose ease not as laziness, but as alignment with life's flow. You stop living in survival mode. You don't brace for disaster. You open to goodness. You begin to expect miracles not as fantasy, but as a natural result of being in harmony with truth. You create space in your life physically, emotionally, spiritually. You declutter not just your home, but your heart. You let go of what you've outgrown. You understand that every no makes room for a deeper yes. You are not afraid of emptiness anymore. You see that emptiness is not a void, it is the womb of creation. What once felt like nothing is now full of potential. You no longer need to fill every silence. You begin to live in rhythm with the pause. You stop fearing failure. You understand that every misstep carried you here. That what once felt like a detour was divine direction. You begin to redefine success as staying true to your essence, no matter the outcome. You trust your timing. You no longer compare your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 30. You stop asking, "Why not me?" and start saying, "My time will come, and when it does, I'll be ready." You choose courage over comfort. You walk into rooms that once terrified you. You speak words that once trembled on your tongue. You realize that fear does not disappear, but you are no longer ruled by it. You are no longer swayed by trends. You stop molding yourself to be digestible. You allow yourself to be complex, contradictory, and real. You are done shrinking to fit into boxes you were never made for. You stop living for the highlight reel. You stop curating a life that looks good but feels empty. You trade performance for presence. You start sharing your truth raw, unfiltered, and unafraid. You begin to honor endings. You no longer cling to what has run its course. You bow to the closing of doors. You don't chase what is leaving. You know that grief and grace walk hand in hand. You embrace uncertainty. You don't demand guarantees. You understand that life is not a contract, it's a dance. You learn to move with the music, even when you can't hear the melody. You stop demanding perfection from yourself. You let yourself be messy, inconsistent, human. You realize that healing is not a straight line, it is a spiral. Some days you fly, some days you crawl, all of it counts. You begin to embody boundaries, not as walls, but as sacred lines that protect your peace. You stop over-explaining. You say no without guilt. You say yes without resentment. Your energy is a temple, and not everyone is allowed inside. You notice your body feels lighter. not because you've lost weight, but because you've released burdens. You're no longer carrying the opinions of others, the weight of the past, or the need to prove anything. You create because you must, because there is something in you that insists on being born. You no longer create for applause. You create because it keeps you alive, because it is how you pray. You stop seeing life as linear. You begin to trust the spiral path. You realize that you return to old lessons not because you failed, but because each time you return, you understand them more deeply. You welcome new versions of yourself. You stop clinging to who you used to be. You allow yourself to evolve, to outgrow, to unfold. You realize the goal is not to stay the same, it is to become more fully alive. You stop asking for external signs and begin listening to your inner compass. You trust the quiet knowing. You follow the whisper instead of the shout. You no longer need lightning, the candle is enough. You start to feel safe in your own presence. You enjoy your own company. You no longer run from solitude, you rest in yourself. You are home not in a place, but in your own being. You forgive yourself not just once, but again and again, for what you did, for what you didn't do, for what you didn't know then but know now. That forgiveness is the beginning of your freedom. You stop seeking permission to exist. You take up space. You speak your truth. You stand in your essence without apology. You stop trying to shrink your soul to make others comfortable. You recognize that peace is a practice. It doesn't just arrive, it is chosen daily, in how you breathe, in what you allow, in where you place your attention. You begin to protect that peace like a sacred fire. You begin to embody what you used to only understand intellectually. The books, the quotes, the wisdom, it lives in your bones now. You don't just talk about transformation, you are living it. You realize you are not behind, you are not broken, you are exactly where you need to be. The detours, the delays, the heartbreaks, they were all initiations. You begin to thank the pain for its purpose. You love more freely, you hold more loosely, you give without calculation, you receive without shame. You stop guarding your heart and start opening it because you trust yourself enough to survive its breaking. You stop waiting for the storm to pass. You learn to dance in the rain. You begin to see that joy and sorrow can live in the same breath, that your soul is big enough to hold them both. You understand that the best stage of your life is not one without challenge, it is one with truth. It is not free of pain, it is full of meaning. It is not perfect, it is whole. And as this awareness settles deep into your chest, you exhale. You look around. Nothing may have changed on the outside, yet everything has shifted on the inside. You are here, you have arrived, not at a destination, but in yourself. The best stage of your life is not ahead, it is here, now, within you, and it is just beginning. You begin to live with reverence. Every moment feels sacred. Every interaction carries depth. You are no longer skimming the surface of life, you are swimming in its depths, unafraid of what you may find. Even the mundane becomes mystical when seen through awakened eyes. You lose interest in drama, both your own and others. You are no longer addicted to the highs and lows of emotional chaos. Peace becomes your preference. You do not chase closure. You do not argue to be right. You choose what nourishes your nervous system. You welcome solitude as a form of strength. You do not fear being alone with your thoughts. You begin to see solitude not as a lack, but as a space where the soul speaks. You no longer reach out in desperation, you reach in with devotion. You are no longer triggered by everything. The need to defend yourself diminishes. You don't react, you respond. You recognize that not every battle is yours to fight. You conserve your energy for what truly matters. You see beauty in others without feeling inferior. You no longer compare in a way that diminishes your worth. You are inspired, not intimidated. You understand that someone else's light does not dim yours, it invites you to shine. You stop chasing happiness and begin cultivating meaning. You understand that joy is not a destination, it is a companion. It lives quietly within presence, honesty, and alignment. You laugh more, not because everything is easy, but because you are no longer carrying what is heavy. You allow others to be themselves even if they are messy, loud, or wrong. You no longer try to control their path. You understand that the soul learns not through perfection, but through experience. Compassion replaces control. You release urgency. You stop rushing your healing, your success, your relationships. You trust the divine unfolding. You know that what is meant for you will not miss you, and what is not meant for you cannot stay. You let your body lead. You sense when something feels expansive or contractive. You honor your gut before your logic. You begin to realize that your body has been speaking truth all along. You were just taught not to listen. You hold space for paradox. You are sad and grateful, confused and clear, grieving and growing. You understand that truth is rarely black or white. You stop needing simple answers for complex feelings. You see your past self with kindness. You no longer cringe at who you were. You bless that version of you. You see their effort, their pain, their survival. You stop punishing your past and start honoring its part in your becoming. You create rituals, not just routines. Your mornings are sacred. Your nights are slow. You light candles not for aesthetics, but for presence. You no longer live by productivity alone. You live by intention. You let go of punishment of others and yourself. You do not shame people into change. You do not shame yourself into discipline. You lead with compassion, knowing that transformation rooted in love lasts longer than any fear-based correction. You find yourself smiling at nothing, walking slower, speaking softer, loving deeper. It is not because life has become perfect, but because you have found something unshakable within yourself. You are no longer in search of the light, you have become it. You begin to identify less with your pain and more with your power. You are no longer telling the story of what broke you. You are telling the story of how you rebuilt. You become the main character in your narrative, not the victim, not the villain, but the soul waking up. You cherish your peace so much that you no longer open doors to what disturbs it. You choose people who regulate, not activate. You protect your inner world like sacred ground. You do not let just anyone in. You stop multitasking your way through life. You eat with presence. You listen with attention. You walk with awareness. You understand that depth requires slowness, and you are no longer in a hurry to miss the point. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You don't correct every misperception. You don't explain yourself endlessly. You know who you are, and you let others come to their own conclusions. Your peace no longer depends on their comprehension. You practice radical acceptance of yourself, of others, of what is. This doesn't mean passivity, it means choosing truth over illusion. You do not resist what is real. You face it, embrace it, and alchemize it. You are no longer obsessed with being liked. You'd rather be respected. You'd rather be authentic. You'd rather be alone than accepted for a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. You stop betraying yourself for belonging. You see death differently, not just the literal kind, but symbolic deaths, the end of relationships, roles, identities. You realize every death is a doorway. You stop clinging and begin honoring what is ready to fall away. You stop catastrophizing your emotions. You do not panic when grief arrives. You do not resist when anger bubbles up. You let them pass like weather through your body. Emotions become energy, not enemies. You speak kindly to yourself. Your inner dialogue shifts from critic to caretaker. You motivate through love, not fear. You become your own sanctuary, your own safest space. You stop chasing closure. You create it. You do not wait for apologies or explanations. You do not need others to agree with your healing. You declare it complete not because it's perfect, but because it's enough. You hold yourself accountable, not with cruelty, but with clarity. You name your patterns. You name your projections. You stop blaming everyone else. You begin the long, beautiful work of self-responsibility. You don't need life to be extraordinary. You only need it to be real. You are no longer seduced by the spectacular. You are moved by what is true, what is kind, what is quietly beautiful. You begin to see that you are not a problem to be solved. You are not broken. You are becoming. The cracks were never your shame. They were the openings for the light to pour through. You recognize that everything that led you here, every tear, every silence, every ending was sacred. You do not wish it different. You bow to it, you bless it, you thank it, and then you rise because now you are ready. You are not just stepping into the best stage of your life, you are becoming it, moment by moment, breath by breath. Truth by truth, the old has burned, the ashes are fertile, the roots are growing, and the light at last is breaking through. Your best life is not waiting, it is within you, and it has already begun.